This is Jocko Podcast number 233 with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
So, the last podcast we were reviewing a book about the Boer Wars, and we're going to pick up where we left off last time, which is what the British did with the lessons that they learned, the military reforms that they made, and how they made this transition, and then where it ended up in World War I. So the name of the book is The Boer War and Military Reforms by J. Stone and Erwin Schmidl. And let's take it back to the book. So picking up where we left off, this is when they start talking about the reforms that got made. From the top down, appointments were made in a casual, random manner that often resulted in poor matching of personality, skills, or personal inclinations to the demands of a particular post. So the way that they were appointing officers was just kind of random. And then the way they were matching up teams was also kind of random. And then you take the wrong personalities and mix them together, you're not going to end up with good leadership. Mm-hmm. Continuing on, if locating and assigning qualified officers to proper posts proved a problem, the same must be said of the selection of individual units and even private soldiers. What unit cohesion had existed vanished quickly in South Africa. Lyttleton's division, for no apparent reason, shrank in a few weeks from 8 battalions to 5.5. Regiments were broken up into smaller units, then reconstituted into mixed battalions. This was done with a seeming disregard of structural and historic uniformity, with adverse consequences on esprit de corps in an army with strong regimental ties. So they take a bunch of teams, they get to South Africa, and they split them all up and mix them all up. This is just a bad move. I used to feel like I was kind of cheating a little bit when it came to when Task Unit Bruiser was going through our pre-deployment workup, because we would train, we'd split up and we'd mix up, but when we had to do a training operation, we'd get in our units and we'd stick to them for the most part, because it was just so much better. Yeah. So much better when you're working with people you worked with. And they just threw that out the window here.
Yeah. Wait, you said you felt like you're cheating?
Yeah, I felt like I was cheating.
Yeah.
Because it was so much more effective.
It was like an advantage.
It was just such an advantage. Yeah. And they'd try and give us, multiple targets where you could kind of convince yourself that it would be a good idea to take these guys and move them over to this platoon and take these, and just no. Yeah. No, we'll just stick with the platoon integrity.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do interoperability, because you should. And you should be able to mix people up, but you should also have that kind of baseline. And there's a reason. There's like the regimental, historical esprit de corps. That's real. Continuing on, bureaucratically, the system was a nightmare, as an official account of manpower was sometimes lost for months at a time. The lack of coherence was not due to want of paperwork, for if anything, the pre-war structure was overly centralized. In 1898, the Broderick Committee on Decentralization heard testimony from the general commanding at Aldershot that it took 12 signatures, including 2 orders from London, to return an unsatisfactory driver. So you got some micromanagement going on, some centralized command. That's never good. Fast forward a little bit. Staff work thus fell on about 70 officers, some well-trained, but many useless, although pleasant aristocrats. Boer later claimed that in Pretoria, I found Roberts sitting in one building with his Hindu staff, Kitchener in another with his Egyptian staff, and Kelly Kenny in a third with an English staff, all pulling against one another. With so many centers of control functioning at once, it should come as no surprise that time and again key points would be left unguarded, isolated battalions unsupported, or critically needed guns unassigned. The saving grace to an otherwise chaotic system was Robert's phenomenal memory and attention to detail. So you got these guys that have their own little silos set up. You got Kitchener that had worked in Egypt and worked with the Egyptians, and he brought them into South Africa, and same thing with Roberts with his Hindu staff. They all had their own little cliques. That's not going to work out good. You're not working together. Troops, and because of that, fast forward a little bit, troops sometimes went hungry, cavalry sometimes lacked horses, and hospital arrangements rarely proved adequate. Kitchener's misunderstanding of staff principles was best demonstrated when he wrote about the battlefield, imposing his will rather than staying at his headquarters and manifesting it through properly organized staff channels. So again, that means he doesn't trust his people. He's out there on the battlefield trying to tell people exactly what to do, and what kind of oversight are you giving when you're out there on the battlefield barking orders at people to tell them exactly what to do? Not going to work out well. Allenby summed up the view of a commander of a subordinate column by noting, one is always at high pressure, one is probably under the same general for about a month at a time. When he has played about and knocked one's column to rags, he goes off. That's what the subordinates were saying. Oh, you're going to show up here for a month, you're going to bark orders, you're going to yell at us, tell us to do stuff, and when we're all worn out, you're going to bail. The drawbacks of Kitchener's system are obvious: over-centralization, isolation from the field, and time lags. After a year of frustration, Kitchener agreed to the appointment of Ian Hamilton as chief of staff. This was an admission that given the greater size, complexity, and distances of modern warfare, coupled with extreme dispersion of forces, that no individual could single-handedly run an entire war. But that was a year deep. This is something that's something I see a lot, is people that they're too egotistical to say, hey, you know what, I need some help. I need to hire a number two.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's just ego kicking in. They talk about running the railroad because that was a big part, and the British really didn't have the capability. They didn't have that in their capabilities of, hey, we need to run this rail. The British military needs to run a railroad, and they didn't really have that capability. I also circled one note in here about the fact that what Roberts ultimately did was resorted to having hostages, civilians, on the trains to try and keep them safe. Interesting advancement here. The soldiers benefited from the first individual field dressing kits and identification cards. This information proved so useful that in 1906 dog tags were introduced. So there's the introduction of dog tags in the world. I thought that was interesting. They also founded the Royal Army Medical Corps. So they realized some of the things that they needed to do from a medical perspective. Another thing they say here, a major complaint of medical officers was the enormous amount of red tape. Surgeons spoke of an inability to operate because of long hours spent behind the desk. Check out this statistic. Over the course of the war, poor water and sanitation were largely responsible for an annual sickness rate of 958 men per 1,000. So almost every single person, you are going to get sick. And they're not reporting like minor colds. They're reporting, hey, this guy was out of duty. So that's why all the support people out there that are listening to this, all the military support people out there, doesn't happen if you're not there. Logistics wins wars. You can't win a war if everyone's sick. Fast forward a little bit. In all areas, the changes wrought by the Boer War were by no means limited to higher organization nor to big-ticket items such as larger guns, hospital ships, or armored trains. Many seemingly minor changes occurred as well. What stand out are the changes in the mundane items of soldierly life, such as uniforms and personal equipment. Perhaps the most obvious of these was the evolution toward uniformity of battlefield attire among all types of troops. This led to the adoption of the India-inspired khaki-colored drill field uniforms by all except the Highlanders. Economy and camouflage potential became the new standard of production, yet it was only with the widespread use of smokeless powder that these qualities could take precedence. Previously, rapid-fire weaponry had been restricted by the heavy smoke that would cover a battlefield. Under those circumstances, camouflage uniforms seemed superfluous and needlessly unattractive. So this is where you start getting camouflage uniforms. Because before, there'd be so much smoke on the field that it was just pointless to even have camouflage. No one could see you anyways. Right. So you might as well look good if you're a Brit. Pre-war dress standards in the British Army had always emphasized excessive smartness to the point of making it the most unserviceable and unworkable in the world. in the eyes of some contemporaries. Perhaps the most pernicious effect of smartness. So they had these really nice looking uniforms, which were totally unfunctional. However, there was a need to discipline men to take cover during pre-war training. Having to pay for damaged uniforms discouraged ready use of the ground. So these guys would have these uniforms that were so nice that during training, they wouldn't want to get on the ground. Regarding the rest of the kit, wherever possible, is lightened, including the adoption of aluminum canteen, first developed in Germany. So they're making stuff lighter. This is why some of these things, this is where you start getting the first modern war. You know, there's a couple wars that you can talk about that were the first modern war. These are some of the things that make you start saying, these are legit movements forward toward modern war. Mm-hmm. To outfit an entire army in the same manner had advantages aside from ease of supply and economy. Now, this is. I made a quick note here. I always talk about decentralized, right? Decentralized command, everything's got to be decentralized, and it does. Mm. That being said, some things should be centralized, and if they're not centralized, there's going to be problematic. So, for instance, do we want everyone in our platoon of 40 guys, do we want everyone to have different weapons? What do you think?
No.
No, we do not. We want everyone to have the same weapon. So where are we going to get that weapon from? A centralized place. So when we all have the same weapon, we all have the same parts, we all have the same ammunition, that's what we want. We don't want everyone carrying their own different type of weapon. Uniform, same thing. We want everyone to look the same. Medical kit. Where is that medical kit going to go on your gear? You want it in the same spot. So if you get shot, I can come over. I know where your medical kit is. So there's some things that absolutely have to be centralized. So occasionally, like I'll be working with a company and there's someone that doesn't want to doesn't want to use whatever standard, or doesn't want to follow some procedure. And I always have to bring this up. That there's some procedures absolutely have to be centralized. When you're in the Battle of Ramadi, you have near and far recognition signals. You want everybody to know what those are, and we had everybody in Ramadi knew what the recognition signal was from a long ways away. Everybody knew it. Army, Marine Corps, everyone had the same thing. Believe me, you want that centralized. You don't want 12 SEALs going out on an operation and they have a different recognition signal than the Army guys. Yeah. So, yes, there are times when things must be centralized. Of course, fast forward a little bit, the essential piece of equipment for all ranks in virtually all services was now the rifle. More potent powders and improved smaller caliber bullet design made possible higher velocities and more precise shooting at ever increasing ranges. So we're using the rifle. That's what we're doing. Both sides realized the potential of bicyclists, as the Boers distributed a company of cyclists among their generals, and the British culled cyclists from various units and retrained 2 full battalions out there on their bikes getting after it. Imagine if they had modern mountain bikes. And now they have the mountain bikes with the electric boost. Have you seen those things? Mm-hmm. John Dudley, the hunter, archer, sure. He uses one of those things to get out to different hunting locations. Why? It's quiet. It's silent. You can take it anywhere. It's light. It's
viable.
Yeah, it's totally viable. Communication was perhaps one of the most consistent problems encountered in a swift-moving war fought over tens of thousands of square miles of terrain. For messages to Europe, the oceanic cables sufficed, but within South Africa, telegraph cables were often cut. Thus, signal flags were used, but had limited ranges of 8 kilometers and transfer rates of 8 words per minute. Much preferred was the heliograph, with a range of over 40 miles on clear terrain and a speed of 12 words per minute. Heliographs had the advantage of being undetectable if not in direct line of sight. What's a heliograph, you might wonder? It's a mirror. It's a mirror. You're using a little mirror to reflect and send Morse code or whatever. 40 miles. You got to have some altitude to do that.
Yeah.
because the horizon is 12 miles.
So how big is that? What, like this?
I
big,
have
like
no idea.
4 or 3 inches.
I think it's bigger. It must have been some kind of machine with a little aimer on it.
Well, shoot, if you're talking 4 miles, that's
No,
like huge.
40 miles.
Oh, 40 miles.
40 miles.
Oh, yeah, that's like huge then.
I don't
That's
know.
not the kind you're carrying in your pocket.
Maybe not. We'll have to take a historical look at the heliographs of the past.
40 miles.
40 miles.
Well, then again, it would have to be trash can size, at least, I
Okay.
think. Trash can lid, I
Could
mean.
be.
I don't know.
Could
maybe
be.
bigger. We'll look into that one.
Can you imagine the number one form of communication that you have is using a mirror and reflecting it towards your buddy who's 40 miles away?
Dang.
By the way, this is what? 100 years ago? 110 years ago, something like that? And now we got an iPhone in our pocket. We can talk to people in space.
I know. Jeez.
Wartime experience clearly showed the need for better equipment for reconnaissance, communication, and ranging. So there you go. Those are some of the reforms. Now we dip into a little bit more tactical stuff. During the course of the Boer War, every branch of the British Army experienced change, and nowhere was this more evident than in tactics. For the infantry, the foremost consideration was the enormous increase in firepower, proper maneuvering and deployment, which could lead to initial superiority of position or psychological advantage, became even more important as concentrated rapid fire had become so devastating that once battle had been joined, it was nearly impossible to rectify any initial errors without suffering serious casualties. Battles were now resolved at an uneven pace. A few minutes at a tactical disadvantage could prove more decisive than hours of marginal superiority. What are we talking about there? What we're talking about is all of a sudden, if you got the tactical advantage, you were at a massive advantage, not a little one, a massive one. And you could get yourself to a position through this speed, surprise, and violence of action. You could get, if you use speed, surprise, and violence of action and you got the advantage, you were at a massive advantage. A massive advantage. Marksmanship was fast forward a little bit. Marksmanship was becoming a matter of soldiers selecting individual targets and ranges rather than collective mass volley fire, and this in turn necessitated a new type of training as one Boer noted, of 35 men whom we took prisoners after they had fired at us up to 350 paces, not a single one had his sight correct. Most of them had kept their sights at 800 and 850 yards because no order to change had been given. Ooh, that's centralized. That's centralized command. You're at 350 yards. Can you imagine you're capturing? By the way, just in case you don't know this, when you have your sight set for 850 yards or 800 yards and you're shooting at someone that's 300 yards away, you're not going to hit them. That's not happening. You're going to miss them. So imagine you capture your opponent and they don't even have their sight set, and you ask them why not. Well, we didn't get ordered to. Crazy.
Yeah.
Keep your weapons doped in, is what I'm saying. The British infantry drill of 1896 had placed too little emphasis on the firefight and too much on depth of formations. At Colenso, the Boers were outnumbered 4-1, yet less than a third of the British army was involved in the attack. The Boers understood modern small arms. Captain Reichman, an American military observer, noted, "I did not learn of any case when the Boers had determined to hold their ground that the frontal attack succeeded by its own power." So what are we hearing right here? We're kind of hearing a little bit of that flanking movement coming in to play. Big time. Never heard of the frontal attack working. Am I going to tell you the frontal attack never works? I'm not going to tell you that. I'm going to tell you, though, you best be leaning towards flanking maneuvers. The futility of the old attacks and frontal assault was compounded by an infantry termed by the Times history as being indifferent shots, careless of cover, slow to comprehend what was taking place or to grasp the whereabouts of the enemy, always surprised or lost, helpless without their officer. In a word, well-disciplined but ill-trained. One might say untrained. Think about those descriptions How would you like your military unit to be described as indifferent shots, you can't hit anything, careless of cover, you're not protecting yourself, slow to comprehend what was taking place, needs no explanation, or to grasp the whereabouts of the enemy, you don't even know where the bad guys are, always surprised or lost. That's a nightmare. Helpless without their officer. These are the worst descriptions. These are like amongst the worst descriptions that you can give. And then what's interesting, he says, in a word, well-disciplined, and you know me, discipline's at the top of my list. But if you're so well-disciplined, but you can't think for yourself, you're worthless. The provisional course of musketry for the year 1902 took the bold step of abolishing the volley. So now we're not going to get online anymore and shoot on command, as well as encouraging fire from cover and the use of any kind of rest, natural or artificial. So now that's the first little step they're taking. And I want you to pay attention to this a little bit. 1902. So now they're starting to take the lessons from the Boer War and say, okay, guess what? We need to learn how to fire from cover. We need to start shooting individually. And the reason I say pay attention to that date is that they're going to make changes and then they're going to regress back. They're kind of going to go to what you know. It's like, you know, when you get the wrestler and he's going against a sick jiu-jitsu guy and you say, look, don't take this guy down. You got better hands. And then he gets caught with a little shot. Yeah. And what does he do?
Take down.
He goes right back to what he kind of knows. Well, that's a trap.
Yeah.
It's a trap. Your habits are a trap. Continuing on, the defense's increased power drastically reduced troop densities. So how many people do we have on the battlefield? We're starting to spread out. Wellington had fought Waterloo with 69,000 men on a 2-mile frontage. The Boers had held their front with only 300 men to the mile. Did you hear that? 69,000 for 2 miles and 300 men to a mile? That's how much different it was. That's how dispersed they got. Continuing on a little bit, larger, more dispersed battlefields destroyed the ability of a single general to command a battle, and even in the most broad of terms. I'm going to say that again. Larger, more dispersed battlefields destroyed the ability of a single general to command a battle, even in the most broad of terms. So you got all these people, they're spread out over 300 miles. And you got to communicate with a freaking mirror. Right? You're not going to. So what you need to learn how to use decentralized command. You need to learn how to give commanders intent. Greater reliance had to be put on lower echelon officers and NCOs. Frequently, non-professional officers were expected to lead by personal example in battle. Their disproportionate losses testified to this role. Under South Africa's fluid battle conditions, small unit command became more critical. And this is the same way the military is now. You can't expect a platoon commander that's out there in the Battle of Ramadi. He's out there. He's making decisions. He's making calls. At least that's the way it should be. Does communication, modern communication, start to allow for micromanagement to take place? Yes, it absolutely does. Which one? Alpha 2, which direction are you moving? I want you to move 200 meters to the north. Take your platoon 200 meters to the north. Roger that.
Yep.
That's what can happen nowadays. It's not good. In self-protection and for the good of the army, officers began to leave their accoutrements behind and play a less conspicuous role in advance. So now we're not wearing our badges that say we're in charge. Role models such as Boer, who remained in the thick of the fighting at Colenso until wounded, became a thing of the past. Senior officers now kept further to the rear, and the tactical role of junior officers was enhanced. In the early months of the war, the British were fortunate in that their unique organizational pattern of 8 small companies per battalion allowed them to have sufficient complement of officers to weather the heavy early losses. But yeah, so now we're moving more toward decentralized command. Interestingly, it was the volunteers and militia. So the volunteers and militia, if you remember, these are like the reservists, people that were doing part-time. They proved most adaptable to new forms of warfare, probably because of their closer ties to the civilian mode of thinking. Mm-hmm. They have open minds. At the Battle of Doornkop, the city of London Imperial Volunteers advanced by rushes and used covering fire, while the Gordons were still moving forward in relatively dressed lines. Cover and move. I love getting to the root of things. Mm-hmm. Like that's isn't that incredible? You have these civilians that are reservists, and they go, "Hey, guess what? You shoot, I'll move." Mm. They hadn't been taught that. They figured it out. You shoot, I'll move. When I get in a good spot, I'll shoot, you move. Ready, go. Yeah. Meanwhile, the pros, the Gordons, were all ready, all rise, all forward, march. That's what they're doing.
Yeah. It's like their creativity was trained out of them or something.
Their creativity was trained out. I always have to give that warning about discipline inside of a unit. Because if you have so much discipline inside of a unit, people stop thinking.
Yeah.
And that's the last thing, as a leader, that's the last thing you want. Yeah. It's the last thing you want anywhere, right? You have a company. You don't want people to stop thinking about how to do things better. You have a jiu-jitsu school. You want everyone just to learn the moves that you teach them and not think of anything? No. Yeah. Creativity should be nurtured. Creativity should be watered, and grown, and rewarded.
You know, I keep thinking back to that what you just said about like they didn't adjust their sights because they weren't ordered to. So you ever watch Coming to America? So
yes.
So in the beginning he was ordered. Eddie Murphy.
Arsenio Hall.
Yes, sir. So he was going to get married. What do you call it? An arranged marriage, where his wife is going to be like the ultimate servant wife, right? Mm-hmm. And essentially, she was like those people not adjusting the sights because they weren't ordered to, because this lady was going to do everything, like everything that he wanted, every single thing. And she proved it or whatever, just real briefly. It kind of went unnoticed, this little part, but it made it kind of basically the same point. So,
dude, this movie had a lasting impact on your philosophies. Continue.
Bro, I'm telling you, there's nuggets and Easter eggs in there, all in there. So he was like, hey, so you're going to do everything. He was like, hey, let me talk to you for a minute, right in the middle of the marriage ceremony. Let me talk to you for a minute in the back room, whatever. And she's like, yeah, at your service, whatever. And he's like, hey, so I want to get to know you. And she's like, yeah, I've just been raised to serve you. He's like, what kind of stuff you like? She's like, whatever you like. He's like, dang. He's like, so anything I tell you to do, you'll do. She's like, yep. It's like, anything I tell you to, you'll do. She's like, yep. Like happy too. So he's like, hey, bark like a dog. She starts barking like a dog. She's like, hoot like a orangutan or something like this. She starts doing it. He's like, hop on one leg. She starts doing it all at once, right? And he's like all confused. His dad walks in. He's like, oh, you guys are getting along, whatever. And he's like, oh, please excuse us to the wife, right? Meanwhile, she's still hopping on one leg and hooting like a orangutan. Still. Didn't get ordered to stop, that's why. He's like, hey, can you excuse us? You'd think she'd be like, okay, thanks, and walk out. She hops out, still doing the orangutan thing. You see what I'm saying? She didn't get ordered to stop. Same thing. Even though it'd be kind of common knowledge, but she was trained her whole life to follow his orders. See what I'm saying? Same thing.
It's interesting that scene from that movie from 1984 or 86
or whatever
has just been floating around in your brain waiting to get grabbed by the Boer Wars.
Bro, I'm telling you.
And the London Imperial Volunteers.
Yes, same thing. Well,
and their creativity versus the Gordons, who were just hopping on one leg and hooting like orangutans.
Or what have you.
Because they weren't ordered.
Yeah. Well, the point there is these concepts are everywhere. You got to watch out.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? So I'm with you.
Be careful. Just like, was that Eddie Murphy's character or Arsenio Hall's character?
In that scene?
Yes.
Eddie Murphy.
Just like Eddie Murphy didn't want someone that lacked creativity, you as a leader do not want people that just are going to follow orders.
Yeah.
I know it's hard to understand that, but it's true.
Yeah, after watching that movie, I understand it more clear for sure. But that's what was part of the point, though, of the movie. Literally.
Your analogy is approved by all authorities present.
Yes, sir.
Continuing on. The agile infantry of the agile infantryman of 1901, who ran and crawled across the battlefield relatively unencumbered by bulky equipment and directed primarily by whistles, was in marked contrast to the 1893 image of the professional soldier, which still pervaded many of the regulations. So by 1901, they had advanced. They were moving. They were traveling lighter. Advances were now made under the cover of rolling barrage. And what is that? That's when you're launching artillery at people so the enemy gets their head down, and that's how you're going to move. That's cover move. First demonstrated at the Battle of Peters Hill. Earlier methods that depended on accurate low angle of fire of shrapnel and high explosives on enemy positions proved ineffective. The avoidance of independent frontal attacks wherever possible became matter of universal consensus as presented in infantry drill. So they have, by the end of the war, realized frontal attacks no good. Psychological preparation for the bayonet assault went far beyond the military training and was reflected in numerous contemporary accounts and drawings. That such occurrences were rare was of little relevance. Interestingly, the Boers claimed contempt for cold steel, as no position or piece of terrain seemed worth dying for. Europeans, used to fighting in far more restricted areas under strict discipline, would on occasion stand and defend a position to the death. So this is the weird thing that they kept. They kind of kept this idea behind the bayonets and the cold steel. So there's an American journalist named Julian Ralph, and he had this little quote. "We have learned that even British valor, displayed by a number of men equal to the foe, is of no conclusive value under the new condition, and that if all modern armies could entrench themselves and could then compel their enemies to meet them in frontal attack, war would be abandoned as soon as possible." Would be abandoned as impossible. What he's saying there is, if you could get in an entrenched position and get your enemy to attack you, war would be abandoned because it would seem it's impossible. You're not going to be able to take out these positions, not against. And what's crazy, this is what World War I is. Entrenched positions, attack, it doesn't work. Entrenched position, attack, it doesn't work, doesn't work, doesn't work. And this guy, this American journalist, is saying this in 1902. Previously, the British were hesitant to adopt field entrenchments despite numerous contemporary experiences. To the contrary, they feared that a defensive psychology bred by reliance on field works, and by field works they mean trenches and ditches and foxholes, did not bode well for a victorious army. Like that's a negative attitude. That's patent, right? We're not digging in. That means we're defending. We're not defending. We're going on offense. Buller's famous pre-war Jack-in-the-Box memorandum, which I looked for, I couldn't find it, is perhaps the most indicative of the English way of war. Battles, he felt, could not be won by officers or men who ducked in action. Think about that. That's when you're telling your MMA fighter, hey, bro, you need to just go out there and throw punches. And if you get hit, that's part of it. That's how you win, because you're a man. You don't need to move your don't worry about head movement.
Yeah.
Pre-war army regulations recognized two types of entrenchments: the half-hour and the 1 hour type, both of which were earth embankments, and the 1 hour at the 1.5 feet high, differing in width. So they only had the most you're going to dig in is a half an hour. You can't dig an effective foxhole in a half an hour. It's not happening. The British infantryman did not even carry a shovel and was accustomed per regulations to native laborers or engineering building any necessary entrenchments. The final proof of this change in doctrine was the issuance of shovels to 2/3 of the infantry and light picks to the remainder by 1903. So by 1903, they realized, you know what? We got to give 2/3 of these guys shovel, and the other guys we got to have pickaxes. Entrenching tools. It is ironic how many of the war's lessons for infantry could have been learned during peacetime, be they the value of well-constructed entrenchments or lightened combat loads. the enhanced difficulty of reconnaissance or the new dangers of the fire zone, the misplaced faith in the firing line as self-sufficient protection at long ranges, or the essential nature of the turning movement in combination with all frontal attacks. If they would have trained, that's saying if they would have trained harder, they would have been able to figure a lot of this stuff out. Now, as they looked at this, there's a quote here. The bulk of the British officers preferred to believe that failure was due to a lack of training and discipline. So we start to head back in the wrong direction. That's saying, hey, look, if our guys would have been more disciplined, then they could have done better. We're not quite so 100% sure about that. It's the idea of, when a jiu-jitsu move isn't working, like if I'm showing you a foot lock and you're saying, hey, the guy's not tapping, and I look at your foot lock and I say, do it harder. That's my recommendation.
Yeah. Same deal.
That's not good.
Yeah.
Go harder is not an effective way of correcting something that isn't working. I run into this with businesses. Businesses will show me the strategy that they're using, their marketing plan, their growth plan, or whatever, and it's not working. And I say, well, so what are you going to do now? Well, we're going to do it. We're going to put more money into it. We're going to do it harder. Look, sometimes do you need overwhelming force? Sure. But sometimes you got to look at that and say, wait, we really haven't gotten anywhere. And now we're just going to go harder, pour more assets into this, squeeze harder on the foot. How hard should you have to squeeze on the foot for it to work? There's a different mistake that you're making. Let's figure out what that is.
Yeah. I guess when is the time to go harder? Maybe when it's kind of working.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying, what ROI are you getting? Because if you're putting a foot lock on me and I'm not barely even reacting to it, we're judging that as ineffective. Yeah. And you start to squeeze hard, maybe I feel it a little bit, but I'm barely still not even reacting. Yeah. If you see me start to react, what do you always say when you get some little moment of beauty with me? You always go, sense of urgency.
Sense of urgency.
So if you see a sense of urgency, you think, oh, okay, maybe I could go a little bit harder and make something happen there.
Yeah, then it does feel like it depends kind of on how hard you're going to begin with. Because if you're maxing out and I sense a slight sense of urgency, I'm like, man, if I go harder, that's might be diminishing returns on that one. So it's like, man.
So yes, contrast your output with your ROI and see if you should just go harder.
Because sometimes, let's face it, Brad, just go harder and it'll work,
Yeah. Sometimes it does. But there's probably a mistake that you're making, right? Yeah. Most jiu-jitsu moves, you shouldn't get tired doing a jiu-jitsu submission.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, occasionally you like maybe some weird choke that your grip is getting tired.
Yeah. Or even like in a competition where you're kind of like, maybe like you're focusing too hard on conservation or something like this. And this guy's kind of picking up the pace on you and it's a competition. So it's like, a little different environment, in a way. And then, so maybe go a little bit harder. Even then, it's like, man, you could think your way through that, unless you're admittedly being lazy. Then you'd go harder, at least a little bit.
When you're going to go harder, you have to make sure that the direction that you're going is going to be fruitful.
Yeah, fruitful.
You ever, when you're training, like you get, like let's say someone's arm.
Sure.
You know who I do this to, kind of. Greg Train.
Sure.
Like he'll get a good. He put a bow and arrow choke on me, and I mean it was legit. Like I had like a little bit of his gi and a little bit of my gi.
Yeah.
And I just sat there, and he went, and we were probably doing like 6-minute rounds.
Yeah.
And he got it pretty quick. He got it within, let's say, probably within 2 or 3 minutes. So he had 3 or 4 minutes of me.
Yeah.
And I just kind of had the bit down and kind of flex my neck, and I'm holding his gi and my gi.
Yeah.
And I had pretty good grips on both. You know what I mean? Like, you happen to get like I happen to get a good grip. Mm-hmm. And Greg Train, admittedly, is smaller than me as well, but he went hard. He went harder for 4 minutes. Mm-hmm. And let's face it, what is the drop dead time for a bow and arrow choke to work? Like, at what point do you say, hey, it's been 45 seconds? Yeah. And this guy did not tap. And I put my knee in his back and I arched hard and I pulled hard and this guy didn't tap. The rest of probably from 45 seconds on is a waste of energy.
Yeah, especially if you're if you're
maxed out.
If the strategy is to pull, like that's it right there. I mean, that's not counting like, because you can make adjustments and it could take like a good 3 minutes sometimes. Yeah. When you're like, let me adjust here, try. Okay, that didn't work.
He had entered the submission attempt. Yeah. He was no longer setting up. He had entered the submission. This was to make me tap.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just sat there. And so anyways, I can't remember if he held on till the round ended. I don't think he did. I think, with 30 seconds left, he let go and we, but he was just done after that. Yeah. He was so gassed. He was gassed like he just did a 20-minute Metcon. Check your ROI.
Whatever, man. I can't help but kind of relate to him a little bit because you get into that position where the submission's in on Jocko. Shoot, you think I'm gonna risk adjusting or abandoning you? No. I'm going for it straight up. I'm beelining for that submission.
You're just gonna maintain,
do or die.
But seriously, you get me in a bow and arrow choke, and it's been 45 seconds. Think about how long 45 seconds is. Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah,
and it doesn't work. You're gonna keep pulling.
No, no, not at all. But I am saying that I can relate for sure with the attitude for sure. I wonder, did he see you? Did he see that you had that grip?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of times, after the 45 seconds, you're like, bro, that grip is jamming me up. So that's the issue. The issue isn't my choke. It's that grip right there.
How good of a job did I do of giving him a false sense of hope?
That's
right?
A good question.
Like, how much did I go?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How much did I give that to him where he's thinking it must be close and it's not close?
I know, bro. That's such an interesting strategy.
I do that with Dean, and Dean just laughs. Dean knows that I'm lying.
Yeah, well, sometimes when you do it, it's like you have a tone of condescending.
I do it to you. When I do it to you, I absolutely will have a tone of condescending. I'm just saying your move is ineffective.
Yeah,
I go, and then you'll go.
Yeah, bro, it's my torment for sure.
Back to the book. This is a fast forward. There was, however, one aspect of British pacification policy that did cast lasting disgrace upon their methods, the concentration camps. The military gave 3 pretexts for their existence. First, they were meant to protect the isolated Boer families whose men had gone off to fight. Second, they were meant to separate the commandos from the supplies and intelligence that their families could provide. And third, it was claimed that the subsequent isolation would force the burghers to surrender. 28,000 whites and 14,000 Africans died in these camps of various diseases. The reasons for this disaster were many. Again, modern war. This is our first real look at concentration camps. And I don't know what the intent is, and we'll have to study more to find out the intent. I could see both sides. I could see the intent of being those things that they talk about. Hey, we wanted to protect them. We wanted to keep their supply lines separate. Like, I could see that as the intent. Yeah. I could also see the intent as we've been here for 2.5 years and we're not winning, and we're going to break their will to fight by killing them, by putting them in these camps and making their lives miserable for their families. That's I don't know what 27 movies you're about to bring up, but where the movie is like, hey, the cops ready to do something to the bad guy, and then they pull up in the car and there's the cop's kid, right? Like they go to the family Right? And that's what breaks the guy. That's what makes him have to comply. So it seems like maybe, and again, I don't have the research on this, but I could see it being either way. That the public facing, hey, we're just trying to protect them, but behind the scenes, guess what? We're gonna take their families and see how much they want to fight once we've got their families, and that is jacked up. And they admitted that that's why they kind of broke. So one of the major reasons why they broke.
True Lies.
True Lies.
That's
True
one
Lies.
of the movies where they do that. Arnold Schwarzenegger.
But did they have Jamie Lee Curtis in the end? Who do they do?
No, they took the daughter.
Oh. Isn't it in one of the Lethal Weapon movies too?
Yep. Lethal Weapon,
See, this is a common theme.
Bro, that's how. Yeah, that's a good move. Really. When you think about it, it's a good move.
Yeah.
It's effective.
You get that. So that's what I'm saying. People go, you know what? This is a good move. We're going to get their families. And it's messed up. Even if their intent wasn't to let them die and starve and die of disease, even if their intent was to, we just have your families, that's just jacked up in its own right.
Some leverage in that one.
Male Boer prisoners of war generally fared better than their families since the army had at least some experience in this area and was aiming at reconciliation. So you got soldiers that go into prisoner of war. At least they understand how to soldier. At least they understand how to, clean and stay disease free. Whereas the families had no idea. By May 1902, after 2.5 years of fighting, the cost in morale, physical, and monetary terms had made itself felt on both sides. The guerrilla war had inflicted more than twice the casualties of the conventional phase on both sides. Attrition became the critical factor. The deliberate destruction of 30,000 farms, hundreds of square miles of farmland, 6.3 million sheep filled Britain with a sense of guilt. The leader of the opposition was moved to question the supposed methods of barbarism in Parliament. Stripping the country had only hardened the Boers' reserve. Concentration camps proved both expensive and debilitating on the British's will to win. So, this is sort of like a Vietnam situation where the people back in America are looking at what's going on in Vietnam and seeing it as a nightmare. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of what they're saying here, that the British are seeing what's happening or hearing about what's happening, and they're starting to have a sense of guilt about it. Mm. Not even the vast wealth of Britain could sustain the seemingly endless struggle in South Africa in the face of increasingly uneasy domestic and hostile international opinion. So you also got the world looking at them going, hey, what are you guys doing down there? You got the women and children dying in concentration camps. We're not okay with that. The cumulative effect of these various factors was to soften the terms ultimately offered to and accepted by the Boers in May of 1902. The reasons given for their surrender included the devastation of country, fear of those in concentration camps, an increasingly hostile native population, loss of property, and an inability to keep British prisoners. From the British perspective, these were more psychological than military causes for victory. As late as, so think about that. And we've covered that multiple military strategy texts. It's like you break the will of the people. It's not hey, we beat you on the battlefield here, there, or wherever. But when you break their will psychologically, that's how you're going to win. And that's exactly what happened here. As late as December 25th, 1901, the Times of London still spoke of large areas of South Africa where columns of less than 600 men could be overwhelmed. Over 21,000 Boers now laid down their arms to the British, a force equal in numbers to that with which they started the war. Of the 24,000 Boers who died in the war, only 4,000 could properly be judged as dying in combat. The remaining 20,000 consisted primarily of women and children, victims of the camps. The British lost 22,000 men, 2/3 of whom died from disease. In the end, superior numbers, wealth, and will to power had won out in conjunction with a radically reformed approach to modern warfare. And yeah, again, this is a modern war where, you've got civilians dying. It's a freaking nightmare. And you also have the big imperial power with all the strength and all the might and all the people and all the supplies, you know, kind of coming to a draw with a bunch of peasants, with farmers, with untrained guerrillas, you know, like we're going to see, well, like we're going to see in Vietnam, like we're going to see in Afghanistan, like we're going to see in Iraq. Mm-hmm. The last section really gets into how this, how those things that were learned are put into play, and they talk about Roberts here and what his emphasis was on administration and communication, and they actually started bringing naval officers in to help because naval officers had a good reputation for being, you know, good at communication, good at administration. You know, that the Navy is a very logistically heavy organization. You've got ships at sea. They have to be fueled. You have sailors on board that need to be fed. Like, there's an administrative part of it that is incredibly challenging. And you got to do all this while you're on the ocean. Mm. So they're good at that. The Navy is very good at that. Roberts also eliminated outdated exams and encouraged personal evaluation of senior officers in order to get people advanced. So that was solid. Greater importance was placed on field work during the increasing numbers of maneuvers held in the decade after the war. So after the war, they're looking around going, we better train, we better fix the way we're training, and we better fix who we're putting into these good positions, these officer positions, who we putting in there. It was claimed that of the 40,000 dead or wounded suffered by both sides in the war, only 50 were a result of the sword or the lance. In the light of the Dickinson's committees finding that a more prominent position must be given to the training of cavalry soldier and the use of the fire weapon, the carbine, despite its lighter weight, gave way to the longer-ranged Lee-Enfield short rifle, and the British thus became the only rifle-armed cavalry in Europe in 1914. The survival of the sword as a secondary weapon. So they kept the sword on hand. Listen to this. You know that term, stick in the mud?
Yeah.
Like, oh, that guy's a stick in the mud. Yeah, doesn't want to change. No, doesn't want to change. Hey, we're doing this new, we're going to start working, go plata. Like, no, I like to stick with the old stuff. You know what I mean? Like, stick in the mud. They don't want to change.
Holy cow, I thought that meant useless, like this whole time.
Oh, no. Stick in the mud.
Stick in the mud.
Yep, stick in the mud. Means you don't want to change.
Interesting.
The survival of the sword as a secondary weapon was a testament to its original pervasiveness and the disinclination to waste all the materiel and training previously invested. So they'll also have, what's that bias called, Mr. Bias?
Which one?
You invested a lot into, what is it, the lost investment bias?
Oh, sunk cost fallacy.
Sunk cost fallacy. So here we go. They bought all these swords, and then they trained all these people on how to use the swords. They're like, hey, we bought them, we trained people, we're going to stick with them. Yeah. It was claimed that the lance interfered with the very cavalry function, save the charge, for it encumbered dismounting, firing, and concealment. Regarded as inferior to the sword in protracted melees and difficult to master when little time or money could be spared for a third weapon, the lance was consigned to the dustbin of history. Maintenance of the sword, on the other hand, rested upon tradition, its cheapness as compared to a pistol, and the fact that it was always loaded. Like, I can put myself in the room to the military group that's sitting around talking, discussing, should we get pistols or should we give swords? And someone's in the back, some old school guys in the back saying, what are we going to give these? Another gun? They already have a gun. What happens if they run out of bullets? What happens if they need to take time to load that thing? Your sword is always loaded. Yeah, and it's, sure. Hey, well, you can't really argue with that. And the old man in the back wins. And we keep making swords and keep training people in the swords. So I thought that was interesting. We also have a section here saying in snow, fog, and dusk or dawn, they still thought that the sword could win battles.
How big is that sword?
I don't know. Probably just the normal length you'd think a sword to be.
Like,
what, 3 or 4 feet?
Yeah. I don't know. Seems big.
I have a Navy sword.
Seems cumbersome.
It's ceremonial.
Yeah, you can carry it around though, right?
No, I did not carry my sword into combat.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The return to more traditional cavalry tactics was fraught with difficulties. Years of training led to broad-fronted attacks to avoid concentric fire. Concentric fire meaning we're surrounding the area and we're starting to have blue-on-blue situations taking place. By 1911, it was clear that the reactionaries had won the day in the matter of cavalry tactics. Other armies conscript infantry, it was believed, could never stand a charge. That's an arrogant statement. Hey, look, we will continue to do these mounted charges because a bunch of conscripts, draftees, they're not going to withstand a charge. You can hear the British talking about, no one would be able to withstand one of our charges, a bunch of conscripts. Furthermore, faith was placed in tactical imponderables, such as ammunition giving out, or that some local condition would lead to surprise or a major battlefield role, despite evidence to the contrary provided by the Boer War. So they would still talk. I've been in so many of these conversations as things start to, new tactics come out. I've been in so many of these conversations. Because I was in training for a long time. I mean, I was in training as a young enlisted SEAL for, I don't know, a couple of years. I was at the training cell at SEAL Team 1, which was a good crew of guys. Master Chief Faculty was in charge. It was just legit. But, we had all these little discussions, some new tactic or whatever. And then once the war started, it was on. Because now we had to make sure we figured out our tactics and make them right. And there's always, people with differing opinions. I'll tell you what, I probably pulled so much leadership understanding from sitting in those meetings and not saying anything, just seeing two people dig in and get in a fight over, should you do this or should you do that? That's why as I hear these things being talked about, I can picture it. I can picture someone saying, there's no way anyone could stand a charge from our cavalry unit. It's impossible to think. Because you do think that. You know where else this happens? You ever, I've trained fighters, and you think there's no way that this could ever happen. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, it happens. Because it's a fight. Yeah. And anything can happen in a fight.
Yeah, it's way more wild. How when someone does a self-defense demonstration, and it's like, sure, okay, someone's holding your neck here, so you hit them to the rib cage, and that'll bring their hands down here, right? So their whole instruction or demonstration kind of relies upon the enemy to react or not withstand certain charges that you're throwing at them, and. So, and then you compare it to a real fight or whatever. Every once in a while, you'll hit a guy in his liver and his hands will come all the way down. He'll recoil in this way or whatever. But every once in a while, but hardly ever really when you consider how many punches and kicks are thrown to the ribs,
Totally.
So it's that's not going to happen.
And here's what's even worse than that. When I say to you, hey, when you grab me by the neck and I punch you in the ribs, your grip is going to get loose for a second. And then you say, well, it might not. And I go, okay, hold my neck. And then I just punch you in the ribs. And, because we're not in a fight, we're just kind of standing there and I catch you off guard and punch you in the ribs. I give you a nice body shot. Yeah. Yeah, your hands get a little bit loose, but you're not trying to kill me at that moment. Yeah. You weren't even ready for it. Right. And so therefore I reinforce the idea. It's like in this situation, if I said, okay, I'll tell you what, mate. I'll tell you what, why don't you go down there and stand with your troops and I'm just going to charge at you and see who can stand there. It's like, no one's going to stand there.
Yep. Yeah. I remember my wife's brother one time. I don't know if he was just openly refuting the effectiveness of jiu-jitsu or what, but he was basically I just do pressure points on you.
Oh yeah, right? I had that one too.
But not the kind I'm going to hit you in a pressure point.
No, I know
the
exactly.
Kind I'm going to put my finger
on you.
And then
Dim mock.
Yeah, all these things. And then so you kind of think like, first off, like you kind of consider it for a second, you know, like, man, what if he does really put the pressure point on me or whatever? And I'm thinking, okay, all the times I've been training and competing or whatever, like, what if someone put a pressure point on me, like during jiu-jitsu? I don't think you'd even feel it in a competition. That's what I'm thinking, right? I was like, even the most, I mean, really, what's a pressure point? The one behind your ear, you know, your jaw, and like these other, he did one like by my neck, like in the center. And I was like, interesting. So I was like, okay. And I realized like, yeah, bro, you won't feel pressure points when you're for real fighting. So I was like, all right, even when you're just training, bro, you're not going to feel that. So I was like, all right, do it. And I was like, okay, like we're kind of fighting. Just in my mind, I wasn't getting like fired up outwardly or nothing, and did it. I was like, oh, pressure point. And Brad, all you have to do is be like, okay, this pressure point is dumb. And then when he puts it on, you don't feel it. But put it this way, like if I'm just cruising next to you or something, even like you, and I start like digging into the back of your ear, you're gonna be like, oh, it's gonna make you move, just because it's like, bro, your mind's not like on that thing right now.
I had a guy. This was I might have been training jiu-jitsu for like maybe 6 months, and I had you remember this term, traditional martial artist? Yeah,
TMA.
Oh, I forgot about the abbreviation. So I had a traditional martial artist who was talking to me about, well, you know, I pressure point this, and you know, this blah 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 blah. And of course, bro, you think I'm fired up for jiu-jitsu now? You should have seen how fired up I was for jiu-jitsu when I'd been training for 6 months. I mean, I was ready to rock and roll at any time. And so this guy, he was a SEAL too, and you know how he had like the whole thing going on, the whole kind of, you know, mystical sort of vibe, you know, talking about how well. And you know what I'm saying? I have no mystical vibe whatsoever. I'm like, let's fight.
Yeah, that doesn't.
Let's fight.
Yes, sir.
And we actually, in this particular situation we were in, I had mats, because as soon as I started training, I got mats. So I had mats 3 feet outside of my office in the day, in where I was working at the time. So, you know, he starts talking to us. I'm like, hey, let's fight. Okay, so cool. And I think I actually started on the bottom, and he tried to pressure point my neck, and I arm locked the shit out of him. He's in my guard. He's giving me. You can't deliver anyone a more beautiful arm lock than holding your arm straight on their neck and trying to dig your thumb into their trachea or whatever the pressure point is.
Yeah.
And of course I was like, whack! I made like a face like I cared, and then just slapped the psycho arm lock on, and that was the end of my belief in pressure points.
Yeah,
they would. There'd always be guys that would have some of the prisoner handling techniques would be what they call it. They called it pain compliance.
Oh yeah,
right. Oh, you do this like under your nose. But, above your lip and under your nose, it's like, oh, you'll make people. But, man, if you're at all fired up, to use your term,
right,
you can just grit through that,
Yeah,
and it's different because because they used to use that. If you want to choke someone, you put your finger on their nose and you can lift their chin.
Yeah.
Try that to somebody that's angry.
Yeah.
No, what you have to do is, and what's lame is, all you have to do is actually just choke their face. You just put a rear naked choke on their face, and then it'll open up, and you'll crush their jaw, and it's all nasty and it hurts. That's pain compliance.
Yeah, and so when you kind of think about it, because like you're right, like okay, so doing that the nose thing, or like when you want to lift.
Did you ever learn that?
Oh yeah, I do that.
Did you learn that in jiu-jitsu?
Yeah. It does work in jiu-jitsu in training. It can work in competition too, but you make a good point when you say do it to someone who's mad.
Yeah.
Usually even in competition people aren't mad. Yeah. It's like sport. Like it even feels like a sport, especially the more you train. Like in the beginning it kind of feels like a little fight because you're like, oh whatever, but in training it'll work because no one's mad. It's like, that like that's more pain than this whole role has presented. So like your head just kind of naturally does it. Yeah. But if you're mad or if you're ready for it, like if someone's like, oh, I know this guy always does this, and you don't let it affect you, it won't affect you.
Here's what's really jacked up. You and I both pretty much agree that it doesn't work if you're mad.
Yeah.
And when it happens to you, you get madder. So it works even less.
Even less. And, yeah. I can see that little sequence for sure.
Continuing forward, volley fire was obsolete as the skirmishing infantry were now limited to using it only as ranging techniques. Reconnaissance, observation, dispersion, and above all, marksmanship were now stressed. So this is still right after the war. Roberts, the ever proponent of marksmanship, eliminated the old bullseye and replaced it with modern, smaller, moving, and disappearing head and shoulder targets that appeared at unknown ranges and forced the men to judge distance for themselves. By 1907, the qualification involved 180 shots, over half of which were at ranges of between 300 and 600 yards. So that's awesome. That's an incredible improvement to go from shooting bullseyes. And, I always heard that this came in America after World War I, that's when they started shooting man-shaped silhouette targets and moving targets. But here you go. This is pre-World War I. Had the British responded to increasing firepower by a recourse to harsher discipline and a ready acceptance of higher losses, as did some of their continental brethren, they would no doubt have evolved a different set of principles. So the British, instead of responding to increasing firepower by harsher discipline, because, what I could say as a leader is, hey, when the machine gun shoots, we need to go. And when it doesn't work, we go harder. And it's still not going to work. That's what some of the Continentals did. So, as it was, they preferred to recast their system into a more intelligent, less mechanical soldiery, following Robert's dictates first proclaimed in November of 1900. The British solution was a reasoned response to the realization in South Africa that officers could no longer be heard and dared not be conspicuous. This is just such an important aspect. Every aspect of modern warfare emphasized the individual. Dispersion, which means spreading out. Independent fire, which means selecting your own targets. Use of cover, which is sacred. Intermittent rushes, which means we're going to go whenever we feel like it's the right time to go, not just when everyone tells us to go, not just when we're ordered to go. And the sheer scale and intensity of the battle. The greater psychological isolation on the battlefield had to be overcome so that the loss of 5 men and 25 advancing over 250 yards would hardly stop an advance, while it was known that 50 out of 250 would. So this is just, this whole little paragraph is so important to understand that the British had learned lessons and had actually come up with an effective way of fighting in a modern way. An indication of the new British attitude was the substitution of infantry training for infantry drill in the 1902 manual. The combined training manual, which applied to all ranks, addressed this issue directly. Success in war, and here it is, success in war cannot be expected unless all ranks have been trained in peace to use their wits. We want people to think. Generals and commanding officers are therefore not only to encourage their subordinates in doing so by affording them constant opportunities of acting on their own responsibility, they will also check all practices. So that means stop all practices which interfere with the free exercise of judgment, and will break down by every means in their power the paralyzing habit of an unreasoning and mechanical adherence to the letter of orders and to routine when acting under service conditions. Can you believe that? That's what we talk about all the time. That's what we talk about all the time at Echelon Front. That's what decentralized command is. Every leader is a thinking person. We want everybody to lead. That's what they're talking about. We want to set a culture where we want you to think outside the box, and we want to stop anything that prevents people from making decisions and showing initiative. Captains, so that's a pretty low-ranking officer, were not only granted more independence, but were also forced to take a hand in the education of subalterns, a role traditionally managed by the colonel. So now we're looking at our captains and saying, you better train these young lieutenants, get them up to speed. With the anticipated isolation of the battlefield, and just to reemphasize what they mean by isolation of the battlefield, we're all spread out. There's 300 people over, a mile front. We are not close to each other. So you get psychological isolation. How are you going to act when you're alone? And you get the actual isolation of being separated from maybe from the other people that are with you, maybe from your squad, but definitely from the senior leadership. With the anticipated isolation of the battlefield and constantly intermingled lines, it seemed a necessity to develop informed and assured officers to prevent rearward drift. Smaller British companies with 120 men as compared to continental units twice their size seemed especially well suited to increased individual training now required. So they made the units a little bit smaller. Key elements of new training for infantrymen included practice at various intervals and pacing, accuracy of maintained direction, use of cover and independent fire, familiarization with intermixed units, and the development and acceptance of interchangeable command necessitated by casualties sustained among leaders. This is everything we used to run in TRADET. Oh, we're going to put all your leaders down. You're going to use cover. You're going to use independent fire. You're going to mix up your units. The post-war development's entire thrust was toward a simplification of techniques that would allow for mastery by the lowest ranking soldier, keeping things simple. The Provisional Infantry Manual of 1902 went so far as to eliminate several traditional drill positions and all field bugle calls except the charge. So they're getting rid of the reason you have a field bugle call is so that you can tell a mass of people to do everything at the same time. And they're getting rid of all those to say, hey, individual leader, subordinate leaders out there make things happen. The only one they keep is the charge. And why is that? Probably because that British bravado and courage is still a real thing. And because if you have one emergency situation, you want to at least be able to say, hey, look, we better freaking just charge. Hit the call. Physical and bayonet drills were brought down to the squad level, and the company replaced the battalion as the training tactical unit since it was regarded as the largest force commandable by an individual under battle conditions. So they used to try and direct 500 or 700 people by one man. Now they're down to a company of 120. The new manual stressed the many lessons of the war and was so recognized even at the time. Noted, for example, the tasks allotted infantry upon the occupation of a position, the forward placement of skirmishers with an eye to maximizing firepower, camouflage, utilizations of rests, determination of ranges, and clearing of fire zones. So many tasks on so low a level necessitated a soldier who could think for himself. All those things, we still do those things. We get into a position, we get into a perimeter, machine gunners are checking out. They're getting in position. They're camouflaging themselves. They're getting covered position. You got the point man figuring out where the extract will be. Everyone's doing this stuff decentralized. So many tasks on so low a level. That's what we're talking about. But the initiative, the impetus toward greater initiative by all ranks in the tactical sphere was one of relatively short duration as military emphasis began to shift toward continental warfare. So you had all these great changes taking place, the lessons learned from the Boer War, and they started to get influenced by what the continental armies were doing, the French, the Germans, the Russians, which was the old school stuff. The newer tactics were based on the belief that success in war depends on morale. Depends more on morale than on physical qualities. Same thing. So they're saying, look, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter these little running around in skirmish lines and all that and taking cover. That's not what's important. What's important is the morale. Skill, this is what they thought. Skill, this is a quote, skill cannot compensate for want of courage, energy, and determination. Boy, is that a lie. No one wants to hear this. That's a lie.
Yeah.
You think your skill, That's like the tough guy, right? That rolls into the gym. Hey, dude, you have a courageous guy rolling in off the street.
Yeah.
You know, he's courageous. He's fired up, so he has energy. He's super determined. I'll take someone in here.
Yeah.
Cool. Roll with Jeffy Glover over there.
Yeah, because guys will say that too, right? Like, oh, I don't care how trained you are. Like, I'm like ferocious.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
It's like, bro,
that used to be. I mean, there was definitely a time when that was a much more prominent thought, right? Yeah. Well, if it really went down, bro, I would just get nuts on you.
Yeah.
You know? And you're just looking at him going, I'll tell you what, why don't you get nuts right now?
Well, and you know, when you really think about it, though, it's like, okay, you can kind of understand why someone who doesn't know any better would think that. Because remember back in the day when you're like a little kid and the guy can be bigger than you. But in Hawaii, I mean, I'm sure they say they have an expression. In Hawaii, they call it amping out. So if you just amp out on a guy, yeah, you could take them for a couple of reasons. One, you're just going, like you feel less pain and you're just going and whatever, and you have all this crazy energy or whatever.
Well, you know what that is? That's surprise violence of action.
Yes,
so surprise
that's another
violence
element.
of action.
Oh yeah,
you're gonna get nuts.
Yeah, get nuts. Yeah,
you're gonna amp out on a dude. It's gonna be surprise. It's gonna be violence of action. You're gonna get the tactical upper hand, and now this dude's dazed, and that's how you win. That is a factual thing.
And you just go and and you can even get.
It's a factual thing. With two untrained parties.
Untrained people, exactly right.
I just realized, hey, I just said that's a factual thing, and it sounded like I was saying that would work. It works if you're going against someone that's equally as untrained as your dumbass is.
Exactly right, and that's the point. So you get a guy off the street, bro. That's usually how they are. They don't know. They have no idea what like. They think that if you get a choke on them, that they did some sneak attack lucky thing or something. Like that's what it feels like. They just don't know. So yeah, it makes sense that they think that. You know, you can kind of understand.
That's where "let's go again" comes from.
Yeah, well, yeah, big time.
When someone's like, "Oh, I'll take that jiu-jitsu stuff, whatever. You're not gonna. It's not gonna work on me." Cool. You choke them, and then they get up and they go, "Whoa, let's go again." You're like, "Cool, let's go again."
Yeah. Remember those Gracie in action videos? Remember those? Like that Absolutely. Was how, bro. And the guy was like, they'd be like, "Oh, let's go again. I just need to just go harder." Really, that's literally what they'd say. You know, and it's like the same deal. The
and after a while, you're always like, the same.
Bro, I can't do nothing. You know why though? And I remembered this too, where. You know, before you know jiu-jitsu and someone winds up in a good position, like let's say you just get in a big scramble in a real fight. And you just wind up in this weird, and they get you deep in some headlock or something like that, right? Because you were just scrambling and whatever, you wound up in a headlock. A lot of times, jiu-jitsu positions feel like randomly like landed on positions if you don't know jiu-jitsu. So if someone has you like in the mount or on your back or whatever, and you feel like real, like kind of helpless, you're like, oh, this seems like we just sort of landed here, you know? So if I just go harder and maybe keep my eyes open a little bit better or whatever.
Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying. You know, so you're saying for the victim of jiu-jitsu, that person doesn't understand that the position that you ended up in is a position that you know. Very, that you dictated.
Deliberate, yes. Very
on purpose.
And
that it has an outcome.
Oh, yeah.
Which is known.
Yes, exactly right. But yeah, if you don't know jiu-jitsu, it feels like, we just sort of wound up there. Because we don't have, like, jiu-jitsu is like this map. If you know the map, and I talk about this, like, you know, if we're talking to people who don't have training yet, the map of jiu-jitsu, side mount, guard, like half guard, like all this stuff or whatever, super clear. When you know jiu-jitsu, super clear. You know exactly where you are at pretty much every moment of a jiu-jitsu situation, winning or losing. But if you don't know jiu-jitsu, it all just seems like kind of like a whirlwind. Like you ask somebody, do you remember like if your leg was over his leg or under his leg?
They would have no idea
what are you even talking about? Yeah. But if you know jiu-jitsu, you'd be like, no, I remember one leg was over, one leg was under. It was total half guard situation. Yeah. You're like, there's a lot of things that I don't remember. I do remember every single position for sure.
And you know what's cool? When I would train young leaders, SEAL leaders, and put them through dynamic situations where they had to make calls and make decisions, and it's the exact same thing, you know. And I'd say, well, where were you getting shot at from? Was it from this building or this building? And they would have no idea. Or, you know, where did you place your machine gunners? They would have no idea what happened. Or do you think you have all your people? And they would have no idea. Yeah. And then the better that they got, the more training we put them through, the more they understood the positions, the more they would recollect what was happening, the more they could see what was actually happening as it was happening. And that's the way you need to train.
Yeah.
The more time you spend training for these pressure situations, the more you're going to see, the better control you're going to have, the better mind control you're going to have. Because that's a whole part of it. You know, that's one of the best reasons for jiu-jitsu being so good for self-defense is you're used to having somebody grab a hold of you and grind on your freaking head and grab hold of you. That's why also you need to spend some time boxing and doing Muay Thai. Because if you don't know what that little crack feels like and it happens to you for the first time, you're gonna get beat down.
Yep. Yeah, especially in the face.
Oh yeah.
Like, get someone punch you in the nose or whatever. It's like, bro, it's like kind of it's not nothing.
Yeah.
So it jam you up for sure.
Yeah. Gots to be careful. Continuing on, new criteria had to be drawn as to which qualities were desired in the infantry. By 1906, Ian Hamilton, and you got to read the book if you want to get all the background on Ian Hamilton, was unfavorably equating initiative and intelligence with smartness on the parade field as a cause of rapidity and cohesion of movement. And so what he's saying is, hey, initiative and intelligence is kind of moving us away from cohesion when we're on the drill field. Another guy, Haig's belief that the war of masses necessitates mass tactics led to a tightening up of British formations to mean a density of 1 man per yard in an advancing line by 1911. So we can see that this is a nightmare. So this guy Haig is saying, hey, war of masses means mass tactics. We need to function together. And that leads to, if we're going to function together, we better be close together to the tune of 1 man per yard. That's a nightmare. This, in turn, was recognized as an overreaction to the South African extension, since it seemed far easier to concentrate men on the battlefield than to spread them out. This is what we call modern day dispersion. You got to spread out. And I wrote about it in Leadership Strategy and Tactics. There's all these different reasons why you want to get close to someone else when there's shooting going on. All kinds of reasons, subconscious reasons, actual tactical, like I want to hear what you say. I'm a little bit nervous. I want to get close to you. We stick together. And all those things. All of a sudden you look around you and you got 5, 6, 7, 8 guys right next to you. And that's not good. One grenade, one machine gun fire can take you all out, or at least several of you out. And it's already hard to fight it, but when you go into the battle situation already tight grouped, it's going to not work out well. The French and then the British began to consider frontal attacks the most decisive of all. So you see where now this is like 1911. They're starting to regress. This regressive theory was given official sanction in the 1912 FSR, which is Field Service Regulations, and marked the greatest split with the Boer War experience. Whereas the Boer War led primarily to a modern approach to warfare, downgrading battlefield cavalry and fostering initiative and firepower, Manchuria proved regressive. And so what Manchuria is, the Russo-Japanese War, which was another big war that took place, and they were using the old school tactics. But they were also fighting old school against old school. And they were both playing by the rules. So if you and I decide to have a war of attrition, if you and I decide, hey, we're going to have a boxing match and the rules are we can only punch, then we stand there and punch each other in the head. And if you're bigger and stronger than me, then you can win. And so then it looks like you're better than me, right? Mm-hmm. Hey, you're bigger and stronger than me, and you will beat me. Yeah. And we bring on the next challenger, and you're bigger and stronger than him, and you beat him. And then we bring in a 300-pound guy, and he's bigger than you, and he beats you. Mm-hmm. How did he beat you? He was bigger and stronger. But he used the same tactics, but he was just bigger and stronger. So what are we going to do? We're going to make our military, our groups, bigger and stronger. What happens when you go out and throw a punch and someone does a double leg takedown, puts you on the ground, gets side control, gets mounted, and chokes you? Doesn't matter how big that person is. Simplicity and elasticity of movement were among the prime lessons of South Africa. Formalism was on its way out, but individual responsibility was still quite a way off. So this part here runs through a little bit of timeline that we've been tripping through. I've been kind of jumping around a little bit. By 1904, both the scale and complexity, so going back to 1904, by 1904, both the scale and complexity of military exercises had increased. For the first time, the Army and the Navy cooperated in trial, invasion, and re-embarkation under fire. The troops were by now scarcely visible. So they were using camouflage. They were hiding. By virtue of improved technique and equipment, no attack on entrenchments was considered successful at odds of less than 6-1. And there was no volley fire. So that's 1904. By 1905, maneuver battalion and brigade training had become considerably more decentralized, increasing the responsibility of lower ranks. So 1905, we're still moving in the right direction. 1906, exercises featured controversies over the effectiveness of machine guns. So that was when we start. This is like traditional martial arts. Mm-hmm. And someone saying, hey man, if you get punched in the face, you'll give this reaction. And someone saying, well, with machine guns, you'll have this reaction. People are saying, well, I don't know about that, right? So now they're having a little debate about what's going to work and what's not going to work. 1907 experience was marked by complaints from the territorials that despite expectations of their ability to perform on a divisional level, they never trained as such. So now we're starting to see that the training's fallen off maybe a little bit. 1908, the problem consisted of mobilization and concentration of an entire army of 4 divisions, attached cavalry, ancillary services in a friendly area, the roles of senior personnel, large formations, and logistics were coming to the fore. So now they're focused on the big movement, the big logistics. In deference to private property, which is where they were running these big exercises, tapes were laid down to demonstrate position. So that they're just saying, hey, this is our position, lay down some tape here, because they didn't want to dig in because it's private property. Far more would have been achieved with actual digging, but that had to await the acquisition of larger government-owned training areas. 1909, the maneuvers marked a contrast to those of 1904 to 1906, as the infantry was adopting appreciably denser formations. So they're going backwards. Denser formation, less dispersion, greater commitment to reserves, and more emphasis on the counterattack. By 1910, there could be little doubt that the British tactical practices had largely drifted from those evolved during the Boer War to those of the more conservative French. The Memorandum on Army Training 1910 emphasized winning the preparatory action through strong advance guards to be followed by a commitment of a central reserve. Central reserve. This is like, the commander's in the back, and he's going to commit the central reserve under the direct control of the commander, who was to apply them at the decisive point as part of a prepared plan. You see where this is going? We're doing kata. Mm-hmm. We're doing kata. This is what we're going to do. This is the plan. Once you hit here, then you follow up with this. It's all prepared.
Yeah, and that's another thing. It reminded me of like when I talk about that martial arts and demonstration. Mm-hmm. When they demonstrate on an actual like victim, right? Where it's like you're gonna hit them here in the ribs, their hands, and they buckle over. You know, then you employ the knee, here and whatever. It's not only that they're predicting the other guy's movement; it's they're predicting it, and then their next move is dependent on that very prediction.
Yes.
So when it like doesn't happen in real life, it's like, man, it'll jam you up big time.
Yes. And this is actually the last section of this book we're going to read. The last thing, and this supports what you just said. Concentrations were to be completed before and not during the battle, meaning we already know what we're going to do and we're not going to make adjustments, which is the idea that you're talking about. This idea that this is what we're going to do. This is the reaction we're going to have. And the Mike Tyson statement of no plan survives the first punch in the face. The common military, which is no plan survives the first enemy contact. That idea is thrown away. And we've gotten to a point through doing these fake, drills where you start believing your own ideas. They don't work. And this is why when we started using simunition and paintball in our SEAL training, we started changing the way we were doing business. Because when we started that, it was like 1992, 1993. And they used it a little bit in the 80s, but on a broad level, to actually go to, to run drill after drill, iteration after iteration, really didn't start until the 90s. And then it really took hold after the war started. Because then people are saying, well, wait a second. This is more... The drills that we did with paintball and with simunition, when the war started, they were validated even more. It wasn't the opposite. You might think, well, once the war started, the real bullets started flying. The things got more validated. And what's horrible about reading this and seeing the regression is that we know where it leads. We know that it leads to World War I. We know that it leads to trenches. We know that it leads to not maneuver warfare, but to attrition warfare. We know that it leads to 10 million military deaths and 7 million civilian deaths. That's where all this goes. Because we didn't learn from history. We let arrogance get in the way. And like I was saying with the two people deciding to fight, right? It's the Russo-Japanese War, right? If you and I both, let's say, have conservative minds and we're kind of stuck in the past, we're both the stick in the mud, that's okay, right? That's what we're going to do. You and I are going to stand there. We're going to go blow for blow. We're going to box. That's what we're going to do. And that's what the Brits were kind of looking around the world saying, oh, you see, boxing does work. Because look at how the Russians fared here, and look at how the Japanese fared here. We see that boxing does. See what happened over there? But it doesn't mean that grappling doesn't work. It just means that you're not paying attention to it. It means that they decided that they were going to box. And if you decide you're going to box, guess what? You're going to get punched in the head a lot. And when you come against a force that's equal to yours, it is going to be very, very hard to overcome them without taking massive damage. And that is World War I. And we need to make sure that we don't let that happen. Test yourself. Evolve. In every aspect of your life, test yourself, evolve. Make sure that you are making progress. Make sure that you are continuing to learn and continue to progress and not regress. And with that, Echo Charles. If we want to continue to learn, if we want to progress rather than regress, what do you got for us?
Progress. Always get better. Always progress. Try to. Step forward, not backward. Stay in the game. Get in the game. Stay in the game. Get in the game. Stay in the game. That's it. Boom. Anyway, we do that by what? Working out. We're working out. We're doing jiu-jitsu. We are eating healthy.
Guess what? You know how people sometimes go, hey, Echo Charles, what did you learn? What have you learned from Jocko over, the past 5 years of doing the podcast,
sure.
Right?
Yeah.
The first thing that I learned from you.
What's that?
You want to know what it is? You said exercise is the singular thing that will impact the most aspects of your life. And I never really thought of that before, maybe because I was too close to it, and exercise has just kind of been part of my whole adult life, and much of my youth was like focused around exercise. But when you said that and you laid out, hey, it helps you here, it helps you there, it helps you somewhere else, I recognized, yes, this is something I had never really thought of. I never thought of the impact because exercise was just part of my life. I never thought of the positive impact that it had on my life. But when you pointed out that exercise is the most universally complementary thing that you can do for your life. And look, there's people right now, oh, what kind of idiots, would you say? Well, you're meathead saying that. Yeah. Which we take as a compliment. But a meathead saying that, right? You think exercise is gonna, you know what? Exercise is gonna. It's gonna. So when you kind of go over, oh, we want to work out. Like, no, think about how that impacts every part of your life. Get in the gym, start lifting, start training, start working out, run, swim, do calisthenics. Get after it, man. It's going to make your whole life better.
Yep, it is. That is true.
Little interlude.
Yeah, no, it's, fully. And, man, it's like, okay, so we're in quarantine 2020 right now. So you can kind of fall into a thing. I mean, if you're really in touch with, like, your feelings or whatever, like, sometimes you feel kind of stale, like, inside, because you're not out, you're not doing anything. And not only you're not out and doing anything, you're not out and doing anything for kind of extended periods of time. Yeah. Some people straight up haven't left their house months. Haven't left the house. So that can like weigh on you, of course, psychologically, but I think it's like physiologically too, like in your brain, like chemically, it's got to have some kind of weird effect.
Definitely. I think that's scientifically proven that there's some kind of weird effect. I think that's actually the literature that I read said that there was some kind of weird effect. That happened.
So obviously I don't know the literature, but I know the feeling. So like the other day, right, where I was like inside, focusing, doing some stuff on my computer for a long time. And I felt like off. I didn't feel good. And not to mention there's some negativity out there in these streets right now. So, man, I was feeling like off. Like, man, I don't know, man. Is this all worth it? I don't know what I really meant by thinking that. But it was those types of feelings, I was like, man, I'm going to go outside. And my home gym is outside. There's a little covering there. It's cool. It's nice. But it's outside nonetheless. So I go outside and I feel like the sun. And I'm like, okay, it's cool. It's something. It's the sun, but I'm still kind of feeling it. Bro, I did my first 2 sets, which are warm-up sets, by the way. And it was like my brain just like switched back on to like living mode. Like, oh, man, life is like here now.
Here's the problem with that. The problem with that is that a lot of people don't make the transition to the gym. Yeah, that's the hard. Once they get there, they know they're going to feel better.
Oh yeah.
And if they don't know they feel better, they should know that they're going to feel better.
Yeah.
But they don't. Like you're at least have that thought in your mind. You kind of know. You kind of know subconsciously. I don't. What'd you say? You felt off.
Yeah.
You kind of know that to feel on, you got to go out there and just jack some steel.
Yeah, it's true.
Right.
Well, okay, so when you do lift weights, and you have to lift weights a certain like intensity or whatever, and it's pretty low, especially if you're used to lifting weights, it's pretty low intensity that you have to pass that threshold that it'll trigger a biological, physiological response that is positive.
Yes.
Endorphins, and there's other things.
Yeah,
there's other
for
things,
sure.
but these aren't, I always hear like when people, the way some people, whatever, not everybody, but some people, the way they use endorphins, almost like it's like this just throwaway term, like endorphins, you just sort of feel better in this and like ambiguous sort of way, but it's a real thing.
It's a real thing.
It's like makes you like just like depression is a real thing. Like the opposite of depression, like that boost you get from working out is literally a real thing. Oh yeah. So yeah, the critical, and then consider that notion that affects everything you do. So if you're stronger, healthier, and have a better attitude. I don't know one thing. Well, I mean, maybe I could think of one, but right now, off the top of my head, I don't know one thing that won't improve. Like it's like totally tangibly, measurably improve.
Totally good to go.
Oh yeah.
So we want to be working out.
We want to be working 100%,
which means we're going to need some fuel.
We will need some for sure. So we got to eat right, but supplementation. If you're into it, and here's the thing. There's all kinds of supplementation. Here's, in my opinion, the most important type of supplementation currently for me. And I am one of those people who, like, I do wish I was on this train like a while ago before I ended up getting on it. So this is the kind of fuel we like. Jocko fuel. Jocko fuel, right? Anyway, joint warfare for your joints, krill oil for your joints, and antioxidants in there. General health. This is good. Life. This is going to help you for sure. Omega-3s all day. Also discipline and discipline go. Kind of the same thing, essentially.
Yeah, we have some options there to kind of get you up on step, whether it's the powder, discipline go, Jocko Palmer, iced tea, lemonade mix.
Every day.
Discipline go in a can. You got that. We just came out with the D.
Yeah. Wait.
Vitamin D.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just came out with a D. I thought that's where you're going. You were talking about sunshine.
Well, that's true. That's a big D. Yeah.
Sometimes we have to kind of fake that sunshine a little bit, get that vitamin D. But one of the reasons I made the vitamin D is because I did my blood work.
Sure.
And
blood work.
the area I was lacking, the vitamin D. So guess what? I know I'm not the only person. I'm living a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
I live in San Diego, sunny San Diego. I surf. I'm outside. I shoot my bow outside. I run outside.
Yeah.
I'm in the sun, and I still had. So guess what? I know there's other people that need to get on the D.
Yes.
The D train.
D train all day.
Get yourself some vitamin D.
That's good, man.
Milk. But by the way, one thing I know, you look at situations, they put you in a certain scenario, you want to take advantage of it. How's the milk train recipes going in your house? Because in my house, because both my daughters are home from college, they're on the milk.
All day, man. Oh, yeah.
They're making all kinds of stuff with milk.
Yeah.
Raw milk, that put it in everything.
I never tried the raw milk yet.
Well, it doesn't taste like anything.
It's just,
It just gives you protein, but you can put it in whatever you want.
It's like a cool little base.
Yeah.
Interesting. Is that sweetened with monk fruit or anything like this?
It's just protein.
Plain.
It's plain. But you can put it, my middle daughter, she likes to make smoothies with fruit. So put the blueberries, oat milk. She's doing all kinds of radical things. Oat milk. Just different kind of milks and stuff. And so she's on that raw milk train. Okay. My son, on the other hand, he told me that the best flavor, which this was weird, is the darkness.
Yes, I understand.
That's what he's down with right now.
Yeah.
So he mixed one up this morning as I was on my way here, and I took a little hitter. Of course, I don't know if it was like this. What do you have? You have your twin brother, Jade. You got your little brother.
Kenyatta.
And then you have your sister?
I have an older sister. Yeah.
Okay. Did you guys fight and want to stab each other when it came to food at all?
No.
Okay. So that's what it was like in my family when I was growing up. And with my kids, absolutely. Everyone is ultra dog, wolf pack, protective of their own food.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So, my son was mixed up the darkness. He put it down on the counter when he was going to turn around and kind of put the stuff away. And he saw that I was in the vicinity. And he immediately turned back around and grabbed it and got it into his own protective custody. Yeah. And I looked at him and said, "Give me some of that milk." And he recognized.
Dang, Debo style.
I had to Debo his milk. But I just had a little hitter. And I kind of went into an agreement. Look, it's not my favorite, but it's good to
the darkness. Oh, yeah.
The dark. So, all right, anyways, get some milk, some strawberry milk, some mint milk, some peanut butter. Get some Jocko white tea. Get some D3. You can get it all at the Vitamin Shop. Or you can get it online at originmaine.com. You can also get gis there. Jiu-jitsu gis. Let's face it, jiu-jitsu's coming back. I think it's going to be like the economy. It's going to come back even stronger.
Yes, very possible. Actually, that seems to be the case even in theory. Mm-hmm. Not to mention by practical practice. But think about it. How when you take some time off, you want it when it's time to go back. You're like, oh man, I can't wait to get back, bro. They've been freaking stringing us along for a long time. Us wanting to get back and stuff. So yeah, it's gonna be way more strong. And that's not to mention the people who, hey, I'm gonna start jiu-jitsu. I was just gonna start jiu-jitsu. I was just gonna start jiu-jitsu. Now they're really gonna start.
Pent up Pent up demand. So jiu-jitsu is going to come back strong. Gis, jeans, boots, T-shirts, whatever you need. We're getting there.
Made in America, by the way.
Yeah, no big deal, but every single thing I just said is 100% made in America. There's nothing being imported. There's no little parts. They're not just flying in a bunch of parts from all over the world and sewing them together. No, they're growing it and sewing it.
Growing it and sewing it. It's true.
OriginMain.com. Go check it out. And that does provide the support.
Yeah, big time. Also, more support, more items to represent and maintain yourself on the path.
You know, sometimes the way you say like in a lot of things that you say, especially during this support section,
sure,
you kind of wind it up and you kind of say it like you're going to have a new approach.
Yeah.
But it's not.
That's the gift that keeps on giving, for sure. First time, every time, as we say in the industry.
Yeah. So, when you say there's clothes that you can represent, and I'm thinking, what is he going to say? It sounds like he's thinking, he's making a move, he's going to try something new. Represent while on the path. And I'm okay. I guess we're going with what you know. All right, so we're going to go with what you know.
Oh, wait.
If you need to represent while on the path.
Yes, sir. Oh, yeah. Wait.
How can you do that?
Should we not represent while we're on the path?
We should definitely represent while we're on the path.
Represent, right?
Yeah.
That's what I think, too. I don't know. I might be alone.
Yeah.
But I'm probably not alone. You know why?
Not.
Because I see them. I see the people. You know? I see the people representing in the wild is what I see.
Check.
Anyway, if you want to represent on the path, in the wild, in private, wherever you like, jockostore.com. That's where you can get your shirts, hats, hoodies. Discipline equals freedom. Good. Take the high ground, or the high ground will take you.
Ain't that the truth?
It's all there at jockostore.com. Yeah, man, if you see something that you like, get something. Some patches on there too. Women's stuff on there too. Get something for, your lady personnel in whatever capacity. Is that not good personnel? Personnel, right?
Sure.
Mothers, wives, girlfriends, daughters, cousins that may be female, neighbors that might be female. They can represent too. Boom. All day. Anyway, yeah, jockostore.com.
Also, you can subscribe to this podcast. If you feel like it, you can do that wherever you listen to podcasts. We also have some other podcasts. We got the Thread. Why is it taking so long for me to figure out the new name for the Thread? The reason is because the Thread, I like the name, and now I want to get hit with a bolt of lightning for the new name. It hasn't hit me yet. Normally, I get hit with bolts of lightning. Sure. You know how they say it's a rare occasion that you get. I actually get hit on a fairly regular basis. Whack. Here's a new idea. Whack. Here's a new idea. Mm-hmm. So we're waiting. I got my lightning rod out. I'm waiting to get cracked, but we'll bring that back. Grounded podcast where we talk about jiu-jitsu, the Warrior Kid podcast for the warrior kids in your life. And don't forget to get yourself some Warrior Kid soap from IrishOaksRanch.com. Is that available on JockoStore.com?
Yes, sir.
Oh, is that 100%?
100%. Boom. Well, actually, technically, Warrior Kids soap, I think that's a new one. That's coming out. But Jocko soap, Trooper soap, Killer soap. All there, yep.
All different kind of options so that you, your family, the people you know, you can all stay clean.
You gotta stay clean.
We got a YouTube channel.
Yeah, YouTube video version of this podcast.
You can subscribe to that.
Yeah, if you want.
If you're walking down the street and you're thinking you wish that things were exploding, you're wishing that things were just shaking, you wish that there was military vehicles smashing into walls, well, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. Yep. You can see all that stuff.
Well, yeah, sure, sometimes. And robots. Every once in a while I'll throw a robot in there.
And if you want to, you can watch this video. There's also little excerpts that you can. If there's a little point that got made, I'd like to share that with Fred.
Sure.
You can share it with Fred. You don't have to share him a 2-hour and 42-minute podcast. You can just give him 12 minutes, maybe 17 minutes, because Echo doesn't like to edit things down.
Well,
he's not going to make it into a 3-minute video, not without putting some damn Star Wars effects in it. Check.
Anyway, yes, sometimes I do that. It's fun. Also, Psychological Warfare, if you don't know what that is. It's an album with tracks. Yep. Album with tracks, Jocko tracks. Anyway, when you're having moments of weakness, Psychological Warfare will factually help you through those moments of weakness as if Jocko is there personally helping you through that moment. Same thing.
FlipsideCanvas.com, Dakota Meyer's company. He's selling Psychological Warfare for your wall. Check that out. I also got some books. We got the code, the evaluation of protocols. We got that has a very direct methodology for you to grade yourself, for you to know exactly what you're trying to do, for you to project your path, write your path, follow your path to victory. Get the code, the evaluation of protocols. We got leadership strategy and tactics field manual. We got Way of the Warrior Kid 1, 2, and 3 for all the Way of the Warrior, for all the Warrior kids out there. We also have Mikey and the Dragons, which is just live. Teach your kids, your young kids, how to overcome fear. Think of what that does to a little kid's life. It changes their life. Get a Mikey and the Dragons. Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual. Extreme Ownership and the Dichotomy of Leadership. The books that started it all. Also, we have Echelon Front, which is my leadership consultancy where we solve problems through leadership. Go to echelonfront.com for details. If you want me or one of the guys at Echelon Front to come and talk at your company or to come and start working with your company or start consulting at your company, don't go to a speakers bureau. Go to echelonfront.com. EF Online. If you want to interact with me, go to EF Online. I will be live. I am live multiple times per week, pre-scheduled. You come on, you can ask me questions. You can ask the rest of the team questions. It's not overloaded with people. It's not like when I do an Instagram live where there's 87,000 questions coming in every second. No, this is much more controlled. So if you want to interact, if you want to ask me a question, go to efonline.com and come and get some. Also, we have the Muster, which is our leadership conference, our leadership event. We're going to be in Phoenix, Arizona on September 16th and 17th. And then we're going to be in Dallas, Texas, December 3rd and 4th. ExtremeOwnership.com if you want to come. Every event that we've ever done has sold out. So if you want to come, go and register. And of course, now we have EF Overwatch. If you are in a company and you want leaders that understand the principles of extreme ownership that we talk about here, go to efoverwatch.com. And if you're a veteran that wants to get hired by a company that understands these principles, same thing, back at you. If you want to support a charitable organization, go to americasmightywarriors.org. It is Mark Lee's mom, Mama Lee, and she works all the time tirelessly to help service members, their families, Gold Star families, and military personnel that are deployed around the world. You can go to that website to either donate or get involved. And if you haven't heard enough of my monotonous monologues, or you need more of Echo's uncoupled orations, then you can find us both on the interwebs, on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook. Echo is at Echo Charles, and I am at Jocko Willink. And thanks to our military men and women who signed on the dotted line and wrote a check with their lives in the service of our country. And thanks to police and law enforcement and firefighters and paramedics and EMTs and dispatchers and correctional officers and Border Patrol and Secret Service who do the same. Write a check with their lives for our safety here at home. And to everyone else out there, make sure you build on your lessons. Do not regress. Check with the past. Question what you're doing. Pressure test yourself and your methods. Question your methods, your old methods, your new methods. Make sure that you never get complacent and that you never allow your ego to overrule moving in the right direction. It is easy to slip. It's also easy to think that just because you're getting after it, just because you're training hard, just because you're pushing yourself, that you are doing it correctly. Don't settle for that. Yes, get after it, but do so in the smartest possible way with humility and an open mind to learn. Until next time, this is Echo and Jocko. Out.